The blackness of space was silent, save for the hum of the Endeavor's strained engines. Captain Sarah Dorn stood at the command bridge, her face illuminated by the cold glow of the holographic display. She surveyed the carnage unfolding outside. Her once proud fleet, now a broken shell of what it had been. Sharn ships, sleek, obsidian vessels with glowing red lines that pulsed like veins, surrounded them, closing in. The human forces, outnumbered and outgunned, stood little chance. Earth's most trusted warships, once symbols of hope, had been reduced to smoldering wrecks. "Captain, the enemy's closing in," Lieutenant Haley said, her voice tight with desperation. "The Endeavor can't take another hit. Shields are at 20%. Dorn clenched her fists. The fear, the sense of defeat, it was all around them, suffocating. For months, they had fought a losing battle against the Sharn Dominion, whose fleet swept through human space like an unstoppable tide. Earth's colonies had fallen one by one, their defenders slaughtered, their cities reduced to ash. "Prepare for impact," Dorn ordered, her voice calm despite the storm inside her. Her crew knew the truth. They were not going to survive this. But there was still one chance to make their last stand count. "All hands, brace for battle stations." The Endeavor shuddered as the first salvo of plasma bolts from the Sharn warships lit up the void, slamming against their weakened shields. Sparks flew from the control panels. The ship rocked as if it had been struck by a giant fist. Lieutenant Haley stumbled, catching herself on the console. Blood streaked down her cheek from a cut above her eyebrow, but she didn't flinch. No one flinched anymore. The comms crackled, and Dorn's heart sank as the voice of Admiral Grayson, leader of the last of the human fleets, came through. "Dorn, we're done. You need to fall back. There's no point in fighting." "Earth." The transmission cut off with a burst of static. Dorn's grip tightened around the armrest of her chair. Grayson had been one of the few commanders she trusted. The fact that he had even suggested retreat meant the end was near. Her mind raced, but there was nothing left to do. The decision had already been made. "Helm, course to intercept the Sharn flagship," Dorn said, her voice steely. "Captain." Lieutenant Haley began, but Dorn cut her off. "I know," she said, her voice hard as stone, "but it's the only way. We can't let them claim Earth without a fight. We'll hit them with everything we've got. I won't let them have it without paying the price." "Understood, Captain," Haley replied quietly. The Endeavor roared as it pushed forward, its engines firing desperately in an effort to close the gap. The remaining human ships, fighting against impossible odds, formed a protective formation around the captain's flagship, their guns firing wildly at the Sharn, knowing their end was near. The Sharn flagship loomed larger as they closed the distance, its massive dark hull crackling with energy, preparing to deal the final blow. Dorn knew it was futile, but she couldn't let the enemy take Earth without witnessing the resolve of humanity. As they neared the flagship, something shifted. A strange ripple of energy disturbed the space around them, warping the stars. At first, no one reacted, everyone too preoccupied with the immediate threat. But then the air on the bridge seemed to hum. The ship's instruments began to glitch, and suddenly, a massive distortion tore through space just ahead of them. A shockwave of energy blasted the Endeavor's shields, sending everyone on the bridge reeling. The Sharn warships froze, their weapons silent for a moment as if caught off guard. The distortion grew larger, brighter, and then the unthinkable happened. Emerging from the rift, a fleet of human ships appeared, massive, heavily armored, and bristling with advanced weaponry. Their silhouettes were like shadows of titans, looming like a new force that could only be described as ancient. Dorn's heart skipped a beat. "What in the hell is that?" Haley whispered. The fleet was unlike anything they had seen before, yet unmistakably human. Dorn's breath caught in her throat. Her mind raced. Was it possible? Had help arrived, or was this some kind of enemy trick? The new fleet's leader, A colossal warship that gleamed in the darkness of space surged forward with terrifying speed. On the bridge of the Endeavor, Dorn stood frozen, her eyes wide, unable to tear them away from the impossible scene. And then, as the new fleet opened fire on the Ksharn, she heard the voice. A calm, familiar voice that cut through the chaos. "Captain Dorn," it said, sending a ripple of shock through her. "This is Admiral Elias Kane of the 7th Fleet. We've come to finish what we started." The Ksharn forces hesitated, stunned by the sudden appearance of the human fleet. For a brief moment, the battlefield went quiet, as if the universe itself held its breath. Then the new fleet unleashed hell. Waves of plasma bolts and energy beams erupted from their ships, crashing into the Ksharn fleet with such force that several warships disintegrated in seconds. The sheer firepower was enough to stagger even the most battle-hardened soldiers. "Report," Captain Dorn shouted, shaking herself from her stupor. She needed answers. Fast. "Unbelievable," Lieutenant Haley muttered, her hands flying across the control panel, trying to process the data. They're human ships, but the technology. It's decades beyond ours, maybe centuries. Dorn's gaze was fixed on the gleaming flagship that led the assault. Its design was unfamiliar, its hull sleek and dark, with strange glowing patterns etched into its surface, like it was alive. A chill ran down her spine. She had never seen anything like it before. The size alone was enough to dwarf their best warships. "Who are they?" Haley whispered, her voice barely audible over the chaos of battle. What do they want?" The comms crackled, and a familiar voice, one that should have been lost to history, rang out across the bridge. "Captain Dorn, this is Admiral Elias Kane of the 7th Fleet. We've come to assist." The words struck Dorn like a blow. Her mind spun. Elias Kane. The name was infamous, spoken of in hushed tones within the corridors of military command. He had led humanity's greatest fleet before it disappeared. Over 2 centuries ago, the 7th Fleet, along with Kane himself, vanished during an expedition into uncharted space, never to be heard from again. Admiral Kane. Dorn's voice trembled slightly, but she quickly regained control. This isn't possible. You're supposed to be dead." A low, almost sorrowful laugh echoed through the comms. "Dead? No, Captain. Just lost. But we've returned, and we have much to explain." Dorn looked out at the scene unfolding before her. The Ksharn ships, momentarily stunned by the sudden onslaught, were regrouping. The humans' new fleet didn't give them a second to recover. Every shot, every movement, was precise and calculated, like they had been fighting together for centuries. But there was something else, something far deeper. Dorn could feel it, a gnawing sense of unease growing in her chest. These ships weren't just advanced. They were unnatural, as if they had been forged in a place beyond the reach of ordinary humans. It was hard to ignore the unease creeping in as their weapons tore through the Ksharn with surgical efficiency, as if guided by some unseen hand. "Admiral Kane," Dorn said, forcing herself to focus. "I don't understand. If you're real, if this is real, then why now? Why didn't you return sooner? Why wait until we were on the brink of extinction?" There was a long pause before Kane replied, his voice strangely solemn. "Because, Captain, the time was not yet right. We were waiting. Humanity needed to face its greatest test. Only then would you be ready to reclaim your place among the stars." Dorn's mind raced. "Reclaim our place? What do you mean? Who are you really?" Another pause. Then the voice of Admiral Kane came through again, softer this time. "We are humanity's forgotten legacy. The 7th Fleet. We were lost during a mission to the outer fringes of known space, but we encountered something that changed us. We made contact with the Anarians, a species beyond our understanding. They helped us, Captain. They gave us the technology you are seeing now. It's what kept us alive. And what can save you now?" Dorn's hands tightened on the armrest of her chair. The Anarians. You're telling me we have alien tech? That's impossible. It's not impossible, Kane replied. You're standing at the threshold of a new era. We returned to protect humanity, but we did not expect to find you so close to extinction. We must act quickly, or the Ksharn will finish what they started. As Kane's words hung in the air, Dorn felt a sudden rush of conflicting emotions. Hope, yes, but fear as well. This new fleet could be their salvation, or their undoing. Who were these people? Were they still human? How much of their humanity had they lost in their journey through the unknown? The Ksharn fleet, now thoroughly shaken, regrouped and began to retreat. But Dorn knew this battle was far from over. The Ksharn would return, stronger than ever. And this time, the stakes would be even higher. Captain, Haley said, breaking the silence, we've received an incoming transmission from the new fleet. Admiral Kane insists on meeting in person. He says he has vital information. Dorn exhaled sharply. Her mind was a whirlwind of questions, but she had no choice now. Her people had been given a second chance, and she needed to take it. Set up the meeting, Dorn ordered. We're about to get some answers, and I'm not sure if we're ready for them. Captain Dorn stood at the viewport, watching as the final remnants of the Ksharn fleet retreated into the void. Their ships, scared and battered, limped away from the battle. A silence fell over the bridge of the Endeavor, the weight of the victory settling on her shoulders like a heavy cloak. The battle had been won, this time. But Dorn knew it wasn't over. The Ksharn would return, and next time, they wouldn't be so easily stopped. Captain, Haley's voice broke through her thoughts. The new fleet has requested a meeting. Admiral Kane insists it's urgent. Dorn turned, meeting the lieutenant's eyes. She saw the same uncertainty reflected there, uncertainty that had been growing among the crew ever since the appearance of Kane's fleet. It wasn't just the sudden arrival of these advanced ships. It was the strange, otherworldly nature of their power. Something about it felt wrong. Like humanity wasn't the one in control anymore. Set it up, Dorn replied, her voice firm, but her heart felt heavy. I want to hear what he has to say. The bridge fell into a tense quiet as Haley activated the communication system, linking their ship to the Defiance, the flagship of the 7th Fleet. Within moments, the holographic display flickered to life, revealing a stern-faced man with short, silvered hair and piercing blue eyes. He wore a dark uniform, adorned with insignia Dorn had never seen before. Captain Dorn, Admiral Kane greeted her with a sharp nod, his voice steady. It's good to finally speak with you. Dorn's breath caught. He looked as if he had stepped out of the history books, a figure from the past, a ghost resurrected. Admiral Kane, she said cautiously, I never thought I'd see you again, and certainly not like this. What is all of this? Who are you really? And why didn't you return sooner? Kane's gaze softened slightly, though his eyes held an unsettling depth, as if they had seen too much. I understand your confusion, Captain. You deserve answers. His fingers drummed lightly on the table before him. I was part of a fleet that ventured into deep space, far beyond the known sectors of the galaxy. During our mission, we encountered the Anarians, a race far older than any we had known. Their technology, their understanding of the universe, it transcends everything we've ever imagined. They helped us, Captain. They saved us when we were on the brink of death. Dorn felt her mind racing, her hands tightening around the arms of her chair. The Anarians, she repeated slowly, trying to process what he was saying. You're telling me. They gave you this power. She glanced out the viewport, watching as the dark silhouette of the Defiance loomed in the distance, its weaponry now silent. Yes, Kane confirmed. But there was a cost. When the Anarians shared their knowledge with us, we became something different. Not entirely human, not entirely alien. We took on aspects of their technology, infused with it. Our ships, our weapons, they were enhanced in ways you can't begin to comprehend. But it was never meant to be used for war. Until now. Dorn frowned. So, you're telling me that you and your fleet are hybrids of some kind? Something beyond the human race? Kane's expression darkened. We are human, Captain. At least we were. But the technology we wield, it has altered us. Not just our bodies, but our minds, our perception of the universe. We see things differently now. And that's why we couldn't return sooner. Humanity wasn't ready for what we had become. And even now, I fear you may not be. Dorn's heart raced. The weight of Kane's words settled in. She had always believed that humanity's strength lay in its ability to overcome its limitations, its adaptability, its resilience. But this was something else entirely. The Endeavor and its crew were holding on to the last vestiges of the human spirit, while Kane's fleet had embraced something beyond that. A terrifying, yet powerful unknown. You said the Ixarn weren't the real threat, Dorn said, her voice steady, though her insides churned. What did you mean by that? Kane's eyes narrowed. The Ixarn are but pawns in a much larger game. They have been manipulated, controlled by something far older than even the Anarians. Something that is stirring, Captain. Something that sees humanity as nothing more than a tool to be used and discarded. The hairs on the back of Dorn's neck stood on end. What are you saying? Are you telling me there's another enemy out there? Another threat? Kane nodded grimly. Yes, the Ixarn are just the beginning. And the Anarians, though they saved us, they left something behind. Something that will come for us, and for the galaxy itself. We need to prepare, Captain. And we need you to join us. The silence that followed felt like a weight pressing down on Dorn's chest. Her entire life had been about protecting humanity, about keeping Earth safe from the threats that lurked in the stars. But this was something beyond her comprehension, something far more dangerous than anything she had ever faced. And now, humanity's survival depended not only on defeating the Ixarn, but on grappling with the consequences of what had been unleashed from the depths of space. We're in this together, Captain, Kane said softly, almost as if reading her thoughts. But the real war is just beginning. The silence between Captain Dorn and Admiral Kane hung heavily in the air, thick with uncertainty and fear. Dorn's mind was racing, trying to process the enormity of what had been laid before her. She had fought wars, witnessed countless battles, but nothing could have prepared her for the words that had just left Kane's mouth. Another enemy. A force that had manipulated the Ixarn, the threat that was ancient and incomprehensible. So what now? Dorn's voice broke the stillness, sharp and strained. You say we need to prepare, but for what? How do we fight something we don't even understand? Kane's gaze, though unwavering, seemed to carry the weight of centuries. First, we must unite. The Ixarn were only the opening act. What we face now is far worse. There are forces at play beyond our reach, beyond anything we can fathom. The Anarians, they weren't just protectors. They were gatekeepers, and now, that gate is being opened. Dorn felt a chill creep up her spine. What gate? What are you talking about? The Anarians created a barrier between our universe and others, dimensions, realities, whatever you want to call them, Kane continued. And they have been guarding it for millennia. But now, something is trying to breach that wall. The Ixarn are being manipulated by something older, something that can cross those boundaries. We don't know what it is, but we do know it wants humanity, and it will stop at nothing to get it. Dorn's fists clenched. Every instinct screamed at her to prepare for the worst, but she had no idea what that even looked like. You want me to believe that we're being pulled into some kind of interdimensional war? Are we supposed to fight that? Yes, Kane said bluntly. And we must. The alternative is extinction. I know this is overwhelming, Captain, but there is no choice anymore. The war we're in now is unlike any you've fought before. It's not just for Earth. It's for the very fabric of reality. Dorn turned her back on the comms for a moment, her fingers trembling as she pressed them to her temples. She needed a moment to breathe, to think, But the reality of the situation kept crashing in on her. Her crew, the survivors of countless battles, were counting on her to lead them through this chaos, but she wasn't sure if she even understood the enemy anymore. She had spent years preparing for the Ksharn, for physical war, but this was something else entirely. "I'm not sure how we fight this," Dorn said quietly, though her resolve was beginning to form. "We've lost so much already, and you expect me to place my trust in you, in your fleet, in this alien power you've gained. How can I be sure we're not trading one chain for another?" Kane's eyes softened, a fleeting trace of regret passing over his features. "I understand your doubts, Captain. I've had to live with them for a long time. But the technology we possess, it's not just a weapon. It's a lifeline. We have the means to protect humanity, to give us a fighting chance. But we can't do it alone. We need you. We need the human spirit. The one I see in you, in your crew." Dorn's gaze returned to the viewport. The Endeavor stood strong, its battered hull a testament to the tenacity of humanity, and as she looked out at the fleet of the Seventh, a strange sense of unity began to form in her chest. Perhaps, just perhaps, this new power could be the salvation humanity needed. But at what cost? "What are your plans?" she asked, her voice steady again. "You said we need to unite. How do you suggest we do that?" Kane's image flickered as the holographic signal stabilized. "We start by consolidating what's left of human space. There are colonies that still stand, isolated but strong. They'll need to be united, not just by force, but by purpose. The Ksharn are not the only ones out there, Captain. We need to establish alliances with the remnants of the old alliances, and we need to prepare our forces for the unknown." He paused for a moment, as if weighing his next words carefully. "And most importantly, we need to begin training your people in the ways of the Seventh Fleet. The technology we wield, the tactics we employ, they're not the same as what you've learned. It's dangerous, and it will take time. But it's the only way forward." Dorn nodded, absorbing the gravity of his words. Her mind was still racing, but there was no time for hesitation. If the Seventh Fleet's warning was true, humanity had no choice but to adapt or perish. "I'll need to speak with my command staff," she said, her voice firm once more. "But I'm willing to listen. For now, at least, we'll join forces with you, if it means saving Earth, if it means saving us all." Kane's expression softened slightly. "I knew you were the right one for this, Captain. Together, we'll stop this." As the transmission ended, Dorn stood still, her heart heavy with the weight of her decision. The war ahead was not the one she had prepared for, but it was the one she would fight, because if she didn't, no one else would. The future of humanity, and of the universe, was in her hands. Captain Dorn stood before the holographic display in her quarters, her fingers tracing over the map of human space. It was a map she knew well, a map that once represented hope, prosperity, and the future of humanity. Now, it was a shattered reflection of that past, with colonies scattered, isolated, and vulnerable. The Ksharn had ravaged everything in their path, and the cracks in the human empire were only widening. Her thoughts were interrupted by a soft knock on her door. She looked up to find Lieutenant Haley standing at the threshold, her face marked with exhaustion, but her eyes still determined. "Captain, it's time. The briefing room is ready," Haley said, her voice a mix of respect and concern. Dorn nodded, rising to her feet. "Thank you, Lieutenant. I'll be there shortly." With a final glance at the star chart, Dorn felt a deep sense of unease. She had made the choice to work with Admiral Kane and the Seventh Fleet, but that didn't mean it was an easy one. The weight of her decision pressed down on her chest. The technology, the training, they were all unknowns. How much of it was truly safe? How much of it would change them? She had no answers, but there was no time for hesitation. The war they were about to fight was unlike anything humanity had ever faced. The briefing room was filled with the core command staff of the Endeavor. Dorn took her seat at the head of the table. and the room grew quiet. Every officer present had seen the devastation that Sharn had left in their wake. They were survivors, yes, but the question now was whether they could rebuild and regroup in time to face a threat that transcended the known universe. Dorn's eyes swept over her officers, then landed on Admiral Kane, who had joined them via holographic transmission. He was joined by several other high-ranking members of the 7th Fleet, their faces grim but determined. "Captain," Kane began, his voice calm but firm, "we've assessed the situation. We can't waste time. The Sharn will return soon, and when they do, they'll bring reinforcements. We must act quickly to consolidate the remaining colonies and prepare for what's coming." Dorn nodded, taking in the enormity of their task. "I agree, Admiral. But I have to ask, what kind of timeline are we looking at here? How long do we have before the next wave hits?" "We don't know for certain," Kane replied, his tone serious. "The Sharn have the advantage of numbers, and they're mobilizing faster than we expected. But we've detected unusual energy signatures on the fringe of human space. We believe they're gathering a larger fleet. Which means we need to get to the colonies first," Dorn said, her mind clicking into strategy mode. "If we don't secure them, we'll be fighting on multiple fronts. And we'll lose." "Exactly," Kane said. "We've already begun sending advanced scout ships to establish contact with the most isolated colonies, but we'll need more manpower. That's where your fleet comes in." Dorn's mind raced, but she remained calm. The idea of rallying humanity's scattered forces was daunting, but it was their only hope. "We'll need to gather what's left of the surviving fleets," Dorn said. "We've lost most of our command structure, but there's still a fighting force out there. And we'll need to train them, quickly, if they're to have any hope of standing against the 7th Fleet's technology." "That's where the training program comes in," Kane said, his holographic image flickering slightly. "We've developed a comprehensive training module that will help your forces adapt to our tactics and technologies. It's going to be intense, and it's going to take time. But we don't have the luxury of a slow build-up." Dorn's eyes narrowed. "And what happens if they can't keep up?" "We're asking people to make a leap that could change them permanently. This isn't just about weapons or ships. It's about altering the very nature of how we fight." Kane met her gaze with a steady resolve. "If they don't adapt, Captain, then we lose. This isn't a war we can fight with old methods. The Sharn are already evolving, and if we don't evolve faster, we're finished." The room fell silent, the weight of Kane's words settling in. Dorn let the gravity of the situation sink in. There were no more safe options, no more retreats. Humanity's future, its very survival, depended on whether they could adapt to the unknown, whether they could take the technology and training of the 7th Fleet and make it their own. "All right," Dorn said, her voice firm and decisive. "We'll begin the training immediately. I'll contact the other commanders and prepare for a fleet-wide operation. We'll need to act fast if we're going to rally the colonies. They can't be left to fall." Kane nodded, a rare flicker of approval in his expression. "Good. We'll be with you every step of the way, Captain. The 7th Fleet is yours to command." As the meeting ended, Dorn stood, her mind heavy with the choices ahead. This wasn't the fight she had prepared for, but it was the fight they had to win. She turned to her crew, seeing the same determination in their eyes that had gotten them this far. "Let's make sure humanity has a future," she said, her voice resolute. "The war is just beginning, and we're going to fight like hell to win it." The cold, sterile halls of the Endeavor felt quieter than usual, the usual hum of the ship's engines now replaced with the weight of preparation. Captain Dorn walked briskly through the corridors, her boots echoing in the silence, each step a reminder of the task ahead. The ship's systems were in overdrive, sending out signals to the surviving colonies, gathering scattered fleet remnants, and preparing for the new tactics and technology they were about to embrace. But as much as Dorn wanted to focus on the strategic side of things, there was something tugging at her thoughts, something deeper. She had spent years leading her crew, leading humanity's fight for survival, and she had always prided herself on knowing her people. But this was different. She wasn't just leading a fight for Earth anymore. She was leading them into an unknown war, with unknown weapons and tactics. The hallways were lined with soldiers and engineers, most of whom had been briefed on the new mission, but had little understanding of the changes ahead. In the training rooms, the new recruits, and even the experienced officers, were all struggling to comprehend the scope of what they were about to face. Dorn could see the uncertainty in their eyes. The human spirit had always been resilient, but this time it had to stretch beyond anything it had known. As she entered the command center, she was met by Lieutenant Haley, who had her usual determined but weary expression. "Captain, we've received reports from the first wave of the scout ships," Haley said, immediately handing her a datapad. "The colonies on the outer rim are ready to begin the transition, but they're scared. Some of them are still holding onto the old ways, and they don't trust the new technology." Dorn took the datapad, scanning through the reports. It wasn't unexpected. Change was always met with resistance, especially when it came to something as monumental as the advanced technology the Seventh Fleet had introduced. Dorn couldn't blame them. The power of the Seventh Fleet was frightening, and humanity was just beginning to grasp its scope. "We're going to have to move quickly, Lieutenant," Dorn said, her voice low but resolute. "The longer we wait, the more vulnerable those colonies become. The Ksharn will be back sooner than we expect, and if we don't prepare, we lose them, and everything else." Haley nodded, her eyes reflecting the same determination that had driven her since the beginning of the war. "Understood. I'll send out additional teams to reassure the colonies. We'll make sure they understand that this is their only chance for survival." Dorn glanced at the tactical map projected in front of her. The scattered colonies, fragile and broken, were all they had left. If the Karn returned before they had united, the human race wouldn't just fall, they would be obliterated. "I want all fleet commanders gathered for the joint briefing," Dorn continued, looking up from the datapad. "We need to work out the details on the ground forces and integrate them with the new fleet technologies. Every fleet out there must start using the training protocols. No exceptions." "Right away, Captain," Haley replied, moving to coordinate the arrangements. Dorn stood still for a moment, staring at the map. It was one thing to give orders, but it was another to watch them take effect. There were no guarantees. She knew this. She had seen entire fleets reduced to rubble. But what they faced now was different. The stakes were far higher than they ever had been. The survival of humanity itself was at risk, and it was up to her to make sure they adapted quickly enough to survive. A quiet beep at the console interrupted her thoughts. It was an incoming transmission from Admiral Kane. "Captain Dorn." Kane's voice crackled through the comms. "We've begun the first phase of the integration training for the new recruits. The results are mixed, to say the least. Some are adjusting quickly, but others, well, there are some who may not make it through. I thought you should know." Dorn frowned. The pressure was mounting, and every decision felt like it could make the difference between survival and defeat. She had expected the challenges, but hearing them laid out so bluntly was still a bitter pill to swallow. "I expected as much," she replied, her voice tight. "We can't afford to lose anyone, Admiral. These people, these fleets, have to adapt or we're done." "Understood. We'll continue the training and provide everything we can to expedite the process. We've also detected additional Ksharn movements near the outer rim. I strongly recommend we initiate our defensive strategies sooner rather than later." Dorn's mind raced, but she forced herself to focus. "I'll initiate the plans. Have the Seventh Fleet begin securing the outer colonies while we finish rallying the forces. We need a unified front. Now." There was a brief pause before Kane's voice came through again, this time with a slight edge of concern. "Be careful, Captain. There's more at play here than we understand. The Ksharn aren't just fighting to conquer. They're fighting to prevent something from happening. Something we don't yet fully comprehend." Dorn stiffened. "I'll take that into account. Let's get this done." As the transmission ended, Dorn felt a chill sweep over her. Every step they took seemed to be taking them deeper into a darkness they couldn't yet see. But there was no turning back now. "Get the fleet ready, Haley," Dorn said, turning to her lieutenant. "We're moving out in 20. The fight is just beginning." The Endeavour had slipped into deep space, her engines purring silently as the crew moved through the motions of preparation. The colony fleets, now more unified but still uneasy, were gathering in the hangar bays, readying for the first full-scale deployment of the 7th Fleet's integrated tactics and technology. Captain Dorn stood in the center of the bridge, her eyes fixed on the starfield ahead, though her mind was far from the beauty of the cosmos. "We're running out of time," she murmured to herself, her gaze darting between the tactical display and the gathered crew around her. There was a quiet urgency in the air that had settled on the Endeavour like a weight. "Captain," Haley's voice interrupted her thoughts. The lieutenant was standing beside her, a data pad in hand. "The fleet commanders are ready for the briefing. There's still a lot of hesitation about using the new weapons. They don't trust them. Too much unknown." Dorn didn't look away from the view, but nodded. "I can't blame them. It's one thing to fight a war with ships and weapons, you know. It's another to be handed something completely alien, something that could change everything about how you fight." "I know, but we don't have the luxury of time. The Karn are closing in. We need everyone to fall in line, and fast." Dorn turned sharply, locking eyes with Haley. "I know what's at stake. But I need them to trust me. I need them to trust the technology. If we can't use it, we might as well throw in the towel right now." Haley looked like she wanted to say more, but simply nodded, walking away to begin the final preparations. Dorn's thoughts lingered on her command staff's growing apprehension. They had seen the devastation of the Sharn firsthand and had lived through the shock of seeing their entire world fractured. Now she was asking them to follow her into the unknown. Trust in an alien technology, trust in an unknown war. But she had no other choice. The briefing room was filled with tension. Fleet commanders, some experienced veterans, others young and eager but untested, filled the seats, their faces grim and unsure. Dorn stood at the front, her posture commanding, though she felt every bit as uncertain as the men and women before her. "Listen up," she said, her voice cutting through the murmur. "We are facing an enemy unlike any we've ever encountered. The Sharn were only the first wave. Whatever waits beyond them is far more dangerous, and we have no idea what it is. That's why we're here today. We're not just going to fight this war the old way. If we're going to survive, we need to adapt to the 7th Fleet's tactics." She paused, letting the weight of her words settle. There was resistance in the room. She could feel it. She had seen it in the eyes of every officer, every soldier who had been briefed on the new technologies and the new strategies. Alien ships, alien weaponry, things that they couldn't even begin to comprehend. "Captain," one of the fleet commanders spoke up, his voice rough. "You're asking us to use these devices, this power we don't understand. How can we trust that it won't turn on us? How can we trust the 7th Fleet when we don't know what the hell they're truly capable of?" Dorn took a deep breath, her eyes locking onto his. She knew this was coming. The distrust was inevitable. "I understand your hesitation. I feel it too. But what we're facing out there isn't just another fight. It's a battle for the very survival of humanity. If we don't take the chance, if we don't learn to wield this technology, we're all as good as dead." There was a murmur of agreement from some, but still many eyes remained filled with doubt. She could see it in their faces, the fear of the unknown, the terror of placing their faith in something beyond their understanding. Dorn pushed forward. "We have no choice. The Sharn are not our only enemies. There's something more out there, something that wants to destroy us completely, erase humanity from existence. The 7th Fleet has fought it before, and they can teach us how to fight it too. But we have to trust them. We have to trust each other." She turned to the holoprojector at the center of the room, activating a detailed simulation of the battlefield. This is how we'll engage. The new weapon systems are integrated with our fleet commands. They will operate in conjunction with our own ships, giving us a tactical advantage. But to make it work, you'll need to follow orders. No hesitation. Her eyes swept across the room. I won't lie to you. It won't be easy. There will be losses. But if we do this right, we'll have a fighting chance. There was a long pause before one of the younger commanders, barely out of his 20s, stood. He was trembling, but his voice was clear. Captain, I'll follow your orders. I don't know how, but I'll try. If it means saving humanity, I'll do it. Dorn nodded, her heart swelling with a mixture of pride and sorrow. The first seed of trust had been planted. That was all she needed, for now. Good, she said. Let's make sure we're all ready. The Ixarn won't wait for us to catch up. Let's move out. The Endeavor was now fully operational, her crew and fleet commanders readying for the mission that could decide the fate of humanity. There was a sense of unease in the air, but also something else. Determination. The bridge was filled with tension as the crew worked tirelessly, preparing the ship for the first wave of their assault on the Ixarn. The war was no longer theoretical. It was happening now. Captain Dorn stood at the front of the bridge, her eyes locked on the view screen as the stars blurred into streaks of light. Ahead of them lay the outer rim of human space, where the Ixarn had made their first strike. The colonies were vulnerable, and their enemies, who were once just a nightmare, were now a terrifying reality. Captain, all ships are ready for departure, Haley reported, her voice steady. We've initiated the new formations. Fleet commanders are reporting in with their readiness, though there's still some skepticism about the new tactics. Dorn nodded, turning to face her lieutenant. They'll come around when they see the power we're about to wield. The Ixarn won't know what hit them. She couldn't afford to dwell on the doubt that lingered in the hearts of her crew. The only thing that mattered now was the mission. The clock was ticking, and she knew the longer they waited, the greater the chance that Ixarn would attack in full force. Give the order to launch, she commanded. Haley's hand moved swiftly over the console, relaying the orders. On the view screen, the fleets of the scattered colonies began to mobilize, their ships aligning with the newly integrated systems of the 7th Fleet. The once disjointed forces were now moving together, as one, unified, prepared for battle. The transition from deep space to the Ixarn's territory was swift. The Endeavor's engines hummed quietly, but the tension in the air could almost be felt. As they neared the coordinates of the first Ixarn stronghold, the mood on the bridge shifted. It wasn't just the enormity of the task at hand. It was the understanding that the enemy they were facing wasn't just a force. They were a presence. The Ixarn fleet appeared first on the long-range scanners, swarms of sleek insectoid ships descending on the sector like a cloud of locusts. Their advanced technology made them deadly opponents, but Dorn wasn't afraid. Not anymore. She knew what her fleet was capable of. She knew the power of the 7th Fleet's technology, and it was about to be unleashed. Enemy fleet detected, reported the sensor officer. They're moving toward our position at high velocity. Estimated time to engagement, 5 minutes. Dorn's mind raced as the bridge fell into a tense silence. This was the moment they would either rise or fall. She quickly turned to the fleet commanders who had gathered for the battle. Remember your training, she said, her voice carrying the weight of command. Follow the new tactics, and we win. Hesitate, and we lose. The commanders nodded, their faces set with grim resolve. They were ready. The battle began in a flurry of motion. The Ixarn ships charged forward, their weapons lighting up the void with deadly precision. But the human fleet, now operating with the 7th Fleet's technology, was faster, more coordinated. The new tactics were working. Human ships were hitting their targets with far more accuracy and force than they ever had before. The Ixarn were disoriented, caught off guard by the sudden shift in battle. Dorn watched as the screens flashed with reports, ships falling, Ixarn vessels being destroyed in rapid succession. Her heart raced, But there was no time for relief. The first wave was just the beginning. The true challenge lay ahead. "Deploy the strike teams," Dorn ordered, her voice calm and controlled, despite the chaos unfolding outside. "Take down their flagships. Cut off the head of the serpent." Haley relayed the command, and within moments, the human ships began their secondary assault. Smaller craft, designed to be nimble and precise, launched from the fleet, targeting the Ksharn command ships. It was a risky maneuver, but one they had no choice but to make. The strike teams moved swiftly, weaving in and out of the Ksharn formations. The new weaponry, unfamiliar, yet devastating, ripped through the Ksharn ships like a hot knife through butter. For the first time since the war began, humanity had the upper hand. But even as the tide seemed to turn in their favor, Dorn knew they couldn't relax. The Ksharn were not easily defeated. Their response would be swift and brutal. "Captain, we've got a large force coming from behind," the sensor officer called out. "They're deploying reinforcements, faster than we anticipated." Dorn's heart sank. She had hoped to break their forces quickly, but the Ksharn were too persistent. Their numbers were overwhelming. "We can't let them regroup," she said, her voice tight with urgency. "All ships prepare for secondary engagements. We're not done yet." As the battle raged on, Dorn stood tall, her resolve unshaken. She could see the impact of the new tactics, but the true test was yet to come. Humanity had just landed its first blow against the Ksharn, but the war was far from over. The first strike was a victory, yes, but it was only the beginning. As long as the Ksharn lived, the fight would continue. Dorn knew the stakes, and she knew there was no turning back now.